Welcome back to the Seven Figure Club podcast, the show where we interview seven-figure business owners on how they built massive companies. Today's guest, Justin Frieshtat, began his career by building Heartland Foods, a premier farm-to-table service company. Under his leadership, the company grossed over $87 million in revenue before getting acquired in 2022 by a private equity firm. After that, he served as a managing partner for Kerns Capital, which has served over 5,000 clients since its inception. But things haven't always been rainbows and sunshine. After being defrauded by members of his organization, Justin had to fight through class action lawsuits to clear his name, overcoming death threats, public scrutiny, and the loss of millions of dollars. Luckily, Justin was able to clear his name and most recently scaled his current marketing company to over 7 figures in the first 12 months. So if you ever wondered what it takes to stay the course and how to scale massive companies leveraging outbound infrastructures, then you're gonna love today's episode. So without further ado, let's dive right in. I'm here with the man, the myth, the legend, Justin Frieshtat, not Frieshtat.
It's actually Frieshtat.
Oh, shit. Well,
it's whatever you want it to be.
Yeah.
It's one of those names. I'm not even sure what it is anymore.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you coming on, man. Welcome to the podcast mansion.
Yeah, it's good to be here. It's beautiful.
Yeah. So you have a really interesting story, but I want to start at the beginning of how you started your entrepreneurship journey. What was the first business you ever launched?
It was actually in college.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, so instead of doing, in music major, we were talking about music, instead of doing my work, I was finding all the rappers on campus that wanted to use the recording studio. I was charging them by the hour to record it, mix, master, and I guess you call it my first business, yeah.
And how did that go?
It was all right, you know?
Yeah. So were you going to school to study business, or were you just like, I want to start a business?
No, I really was only in school so I could play hockey.
Yeah.
And I never graduated. I did 5 years in college, 1.9 GPA, just failing everything, changing majors. It just wasn't for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you got into that, you started that business. What would you say is like what did you learn from that first business?
Man, it's just a people game. I think that's what I learned first. You know, charging people for money, going through I'll pay you afterwards, like learning all those lessons, and then they never pay you.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think just learning how to operate and building up the thick skin to just even be able to ask someone for money, like basic things like that.
So that's a question I asked on the last episode that I'm really interested to hear your answer on. Is I think one of the things that keeps a lot of entrepreneurs from making money isn't their ability to generate leads. It's the fear to ask for the sale. So how do you overcome that fear?
It's like anything else. You just start doing it.
Yeah.
But I'll put a different spin on it. It's make your presentation so good that the deal closes itself and you don't really have to ask at the end. That's a different type of craft.
So how do you do that?
So what people do in sales is they will hide from the sticking points, the objections, and they'll just pray that they don't come up, right? But the professional salesperson is going to identify all the potential objections after you've done a couple hundred calls. Like, you're going to hear the same ones, right?
It's like the same 5 things.
Yeah, so you start to write them down and say, okay, how do I bring this up in the call on my terms and get ahead of it, squash it, and then at the end, there's nothing to think about.
Yeah. You know what's funny is I used to work at LA Fitness, and they built it into the sales presentation. So what they would have us do is we'd start by getting all their body compositions. And we asked them, like, because what's the number one objection? It's always money, right? And so we would ask them a question where it's like, hey, how many times a week are you eating out? And it was always like 5 to 15, right? And then we would be like, oh, are you aware that most of these places are using seed oils and things that actually strip your muscle content, slow down your metabolism, and actually are making you fatter? Oh, no, I didn't know that. Okay, so if you want to hit your goal that you told me of XYZ, are you comfortable cutting out some of the times you're eating out?
Yep. And
they'd always be like, yeah, totally. I'd be like, well, how much are you willing to cut out? They'd be like, oh, well, I'll cut out, 10 times of me eating out per month, right?
Yeah.
And so when we got to the end, when we were asking for the sale of something that was typically, $200 a month, and they say we didn't have the money, we'd be like, well, hold up. You told me you're willing to cut out, 10 meals a month. That's an extra, $150. Well, I'm not asking you to spend any more money. I'm just asking you to reallocate it to something that is healthy for you. Are you comfortable making that because you told me you want to do X, Y, Z? And it was just built in.
Yeah, you're building a gap to close itself. No-brainer offer.
Yeah. So, I think anyone that's looking to overcome objections, I think that's a really smart way to do it, is like, how can you incorporate that into your pitch to where you're addressing it before they've even had the objection?
Yeah, and I think most people they don't want to go through the process of being told no, of failing, and if you're genuinely curious to figure this out instead of looking at your results, that's how you find out what works.
Yeah. So after that business, what did you do from there? It just wasn't working out? You shut it down?
It just, you can call it a business. It was the first time I was charging someone for something.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a real business. Like, it was definitely not compliant on campus, and no LLC, none of that. It was just like, give me cash, I'll let you, So I started doing door-to-door sales. That was really it. So kind of like being, I guess, an intrapreneur in someone else's business. That's kind of how it's actually always been. I mean, I've had partners in businesses, but I've never been, the founder type person. And I know that about myself. And I'm kind of lazy in terms of, I don't want to do all these other parts of the business. I don't want to manage all these different things. I just want to do what I'm great at and partner with people who are great at the other things, or put those pieces in place, right? So it was an organic food company. It's actually my dad's business. He had started, serial entrepreneur. And I was like, I can go start my own thing, or I can just lean into this on the sales side and went 100% commission and door-to-door sales. So
can you explain the difference between an intrapreneur and an entrepreneur, and how do you know which one you are?
So an entrepreneur is the big visionary person that enjoys orchestrating and building out things from scratch. Very, very unique skill set to be able to say, because the Achilles heel of most entrepreneurs is there's 1% wrong with you that ruins the other 99%, right? So if you're great at sales, you're great at marketing, but you're horrible with money and accounting, like, your business is going to get ruined. So,
bro, why are you calling me out like that, dude?
Right? So it's like, great entrepreneurs are either excellent at all the buckets at a high level, or excellent in putting the right people in those buckets and then managing the whole operation. An intrapreneur is usually someone with a specialized skill that still has no ceiling on their income. Yeah. Right? Just like an entrepreneur has no ceiling on the income, well, neither does the 100% commission salesperson that's driving the revenue through the business. So I would call that the intrapreneur. If you still get paid for performance, but you're not the main guy at the top.
So what questions do you think you could ask yourself to determine which one you are?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's something you feel, you know it in your gut, and getting rid of the ego around it. Because what tends to happen to a lot of people who get great at sales, they become the top person, they're making a bunch of money, and then they go, I need to leave and go do my own thing. Almost all of them fail and end up back in sales because you didn't stick to what you were great at to begin with. So I think having the perspective of, okay, what are my skill sets? And then what are the things that I try to do? Because I did launch my own business once. And it was successful because I'm good at sales. Yeah. But I was miserable on a day-to-day basis because I had to do all these things I didn't want to do. So I think that's another thing, is asking those questions, like, what is my identity? What am I great at? And if the reason you're doing it is so that you can be the guy, you'll probably fail.
Well, it's funny you say that. I think it comes back to a specific word you said, because I would say that this is me, which was ego, right? When I was 20, I had launched a business in college too. It was Amazon FBA business. Yeah. And I was able to scale that to 20 grand a month. And so I was like a 20-year-old kid, and I thought my shit didn't stink. Yeah. I thought that I was just this savant at business until my defection rate went too high on my product. Amazon shut everything down and I lost everything. Yeah. But I had created this identity that I'm a successful entrepreneur. And so it led me down this path of trying to start all these businesses with minimum resources. Yep. When what I should have done is found someone that already had what I wanted and become an intrapreneur into their business, where I could really build the skill sets, the connections, and leverage their resources, versus trying to build that all from scratch myself, and would have put me in a much higher position much quicker.
Yeah. I mean, what did they say? Like, being an entrepreneur is like jumping out of an airplane and
trying to
building the parachute on the way down. Like, if that's what you're into, cool. I mean, for me, it was, I like to leverage other people's experience, proximity. Like, why am I going to start building a business and a brand from scratch if I can attach myself to someone who's crushing it 20 years in and help them at a high skill set, right? It's like, if you take these publicly traded companies, the top 5 people at a company like NVIDIA that rode that wave are probably worth $100 million.
Yeah, look at the owner of the Clippers, Steve Ballmer.
All these guys.
He's worth billions and billions of dollars. He owns the Clipper, and I think he was like the 29th employee or something like that.
There you go. So what do you really want out of it, right? If it's the orchestration of building your thing from scratch and you've got a 20-year horizon, you don't care about being profitable, making money, like whatever, cool, do that.
Well, I think what most people would say they want, which is why they become an entrepreneur versus an intrapreneur, is they want time freedom. They want the ability to do things on their own schedule, which is hard to do when you're reporting to someone else. Right? But I think what I wish I had thought through more deeply was, okay, yeah, you're becoming an entrepreneur for time freedom, but now you're working 100 hours a week with no guarantee of a paycheck.
There you go.
You know, how is that time freedom? And what happened to me was I started to build this business that was doing 30 to 50 grand a month, but I was a prisoner to my own success. Right. Yes, it was doing this revenue, but I also had a lot of overhead, and that overhead required me to work 24 hours a day or else I couldn't keep the lights on. And so what kind of freedom is that?
It's not.
Yeah. Hit it.
Did it turn off?
Yeah, and then start, stop. Just press it again. All right, we're good. I'm just having her do that every 20 minutes. Yeah, I'm just having her come in every 20 minutes to do that just to be safe.
That's what editing's for.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think that's kind of the big reason why I'm part of Power Team International now is I realized like what I was missing was someone that had the proximity to capital, someone that had decades of experience, someone that had the runway and the resources that I need to be able to execute my skills at that next level, right? So that being said, you started to do these different businesses. You got into door-to-door sales. What did you learn from that door-to-door sales job? Can you think of any specific stories or things that happened in that and what you learned from it?
Yeah, I mean, you learn how to talk to people. I was not great socially. I was the introvert kid that didn't want to go to prom and anything like that. So I think the reason I did door-to-door sales, I didn't know it at the time, but there was something about I hated the social anxiety so badly that I had to go do that to get rid of it and get great at it. And then it turned out to be my greatest skill set. So, and that's one thing about great salespeople. They're usually ambiverts. They're people.
What's an ambivert?
An ambivert's someone that leans introverted, but can be extremely calculated with extroversion. Because they had to learn it. The person who's naturally extroverted, everyone thinks that's a great salesperson. They can be decent, but they'll never be the top.
And when you say calculated, could you define that a little deeper?
Yeah, because if you have anxiety around social situations, you're paying attention at a whole nother level than someone who walks in the room like the golden retriever, you know? Like, oh, I'm so flamboyant, I'm so bubbly. It's like, yeah, you're probably pissing people off and you don't even know it, right? So when you get really calculated with your communication with people, reading body language, cadence of how fast you talk, you know, all the inflections, all these little things that you have to be great in sales, you can become extremely deadly because you're looking at it through a different frame.
I think I definitely started off as that kind of golden retriever energy because I'm very extroverted, right? But I actually got this tattoo that says listen because I need to remind myself, like, shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
And let the other person talk because you could mine so much value from just hearing someone else's experience, and they'll actually value they'll value you much more because they realize you're not just all about yourself, right? It's the classic how to win friends and influence people, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's one way you can become much more tactful with your extroversion is it's not about turning off that energy of being really excited. It's about harnessing it and knowing when to use it versus just like going crazy with it and just being like the crackhead.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so for you, you know, and I resonate with what you said a lot too, because I was the same way. Like when I was in college running my Amazon brand, I would wake up, I would work first half of my day on my business. I would delivery drive the second half of the day to pay my rent. That way I could put all the money back into my business. I did that for like a year and a half and I stopped talking to people because I was just in my own bubble. And what I found is when I would go to parties or try to talk to girls, I was I had a lot of anxiety. And I was like, where is this coming from? Because I'm a very extroverted person. And what I realized was communication is a skill set. And if you don't use it, you'll lose it.
Yep.
And so when I got that job at LA Fitness and I was forced to talk to 15 people a day every single day, and I'm talking to like a 15-year-old Indian girl, and then I'm talking to a 55-year-old biker dude, and everything in between, I realized that after doing that for a year, that anxiety went away because I had built the skill set of communication.
Yep.
So anyone that's coming up, especially like males in their early 20s, one of the most fundamental things you can do to eliminate a lot of anxiety in your life is get a sales job.
Yeah.
And it will teach you communication. And if you have the ability to properly communicate, you'd be surprised how much that affects every area of your life.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a frequency thing, right?
Yeah.
Like knocking doors, spending 2-3 hours in somebody's home to get a sale and doing it over and over and over. First of all, you get exposed to how big the world is, right? It's like sometimes I'm in a $100,000 shack out in the country. Sometimes it's a $15 million house in McLean, right? This was right outside D.C. where I was doing this I did it for 10 years. And you just start to see all different types of personalities, different socioeconomic statuses, and you actually get to build out your value structure based off being in other people's lives. Like when you're in their home. I remember watching, people who, in my opinion, look, everybody do whatever you want, live your life however you want, but I saw the financial pressure that having kids too early was having on all these families that I was going in their homes, and I was like, I don't want that.
Yeah.
So yeah, you'll learn so much, you'll have so much perspective, and normally when I see people that don't have that type of experience with people, they're somewhat undeveloped in their understanding of the world.
Interesting. So what advice would you give to someone to start to develop the skill set of communication? Like, what are some tactical strategies that they could implement to start to improve their ability to have those conversations?
Yeah, I haven't read any of these books in decades, but I was obsessed with information early, which I think is really important. And then you have to cut yourself off and say, okay, at some point I could get into information overload instead of action, right? And now I know a lot, but I don't have a lot, right? So yeah, there's things that stuck out to me from like certain books, just basic stuff that everybody's heard. 2 ears, 1 mouth for a reason. The way the reticulating, activating system works. Pause, stimulus, response. I would build that in, make myself just stop and wait. And most of the time when you do that and you don't puke out what you want to say, they'll just keep talking. And the more they talk, the better our relationship's going to be. So when you're seeking to understand instead of to be understood, that's what makes people like you.
Wow. Say that again. You said pause, stimulate, response?
Yeah. You know how like when you're talking to somebody, normally the next thing you're going to say. And you don't have a pause and you just puke. And a lot of times what I see in communication is you'll cut somebody off because they're in a natural thought process. They stop for a second, they're about to keep going, and then salespeople will just butt in, cut them off, and then that person subconsciously just kind of gets the ick about you.
No, I think that's real. I think a lot of times when we know what we want to say next, we're just waiting for the person to finish, but we don't want to lose our thought. And so we end up cutting them off, not because we want to interrupt them, but because we have something we want to provide value for them, and we want to get it out before we lose it. But if you're just listening to wait for your turn versus actively listening to the other person, it's going to rub them the wrong way.
And I would I trained myself to do this. I would go, just a little pause after they talk. And usually they'd keep going if their thought's not complete. But then I would know, okay, it's my turn. It's my time to talk, and they want me to talk.
So how long would you wait before going to talk?
It's the difference of a small pause, maybe half a second.
That's how a half a second could change the entire outcome of the conversation.
Just like right there when you're like, I could have just talked. I went, and I waited, and you kept going.
Yeah.
Right? Very and sometimes it's a piece of body language. It might just be.
Yeah.
And then they're like, yeah, and they'll expand on their thoughts.
Wow. So after door to door, how long did you do that for? And then what did that turn into?
10 years. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And while I was doing door to door sales, then I started building teams. It was a grind, and I was obsessed. So I knew my commissions. I knew what it was. I was just obsessed with performance, right? Leaving the hockey world when your dreams of going pro end, it's like I needed a new game, and door to door sales was it. And I always had a chip on my shoulder. I didn't like anybody beating me. So I just modeled what the top guy did and just did more And he'd been doing it for 20 years. It only took me 3 years to break all the industry records.
Wow.
Because nobody was willing to do what I was willing to do. I'll go 12 hours a day. I'll work 90 days straight. All of a sudden I'll look up. It's been months I haven't had a day off. And everybody's, just doing 9 to 5. And I'm just crushing them.
Now, what do you think it was that allowed you to sustain such an output? Is that an internal why? Is that, do you think, like, your genetics? Is it, like, because I think everyone strives for that, but it's easy to strive for that on day 3. Yeah. It's much easier to do that on day 17 or day 35. Why do you think you were able to sustain such a high output?
I think I'm kind of sick and twisted in the sense that I like to see people not understand me. So it was kind of motivating. It's like, how much more can I make people just not get it? But there's always little things. Like what I think of when you say that is, I'm driving around 50,000 miles a year in the car, door to door, pounding audiobooks. And I remember feeling burnt out one time. And I don't know which book it was. It was a Grant Cardone book. It was either Be Obsessed or Be Average. Maybe it was the 10X rule. But he goes, you know why you can burn the candle at both ends? Because you're not a candle. And I'm like, we just decide if we're burnt out or not. That,
You're just making an association to a feeling, and you're deciding what the meaning is, and society's conditioned you to go, oh, you're working too hard.
Everything is a choice in terms of how you receive it and feed it back to yourself. It can be the reason you quit. It could be the reason why you go build the biggest thing ever.
Yeah, I'm going to write that on my whiteboard. I'm going to just write, you're not a candle.
Yeah. Yeah, you know why you can burn the candle at both ends? Because you're not a candle.
That's a good idea for a merch line.
It's just funny, right? It's like, that's just the society, the middle class conditioning of just how things are. Yeah. And people have their favorite quotes, money doesn't grow on trees, all those different things. And then it's like, well, how do you decide to perceive it? Yeah. It's totally on you.
And I feel like that's much easier to do when things are going good. It's much harder to do when you're stressed, right? And so I'm sure have you ever had some moments of burnout?
Oh, yeah.
Can you tell me an example of a moment of burnout and then what you learned from that or how you overcame that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the mental stress, you can call it burnout, but I remember I was in a sales rut and I was closing at 87% door to door. Like really, yeah.
Damn.
Best ever. And I remember I was on a cold streak, 20 plus houses I went into and couldn't sell anything. Just nothing. All of a sudden it was just dead. And I'm having all these thoughts is it over? Is it the market? Is it the leads? You start to go blame things other than yourself, which makes it 10 times worse. And then it gets worse and worse. And eventually, I remember one day I was like, wow, I'm being a huge bitch. And I am 100% the reason why this is happening. And I think it was a book, Jocko Willink's Extreme Ownership. And then the next day it was just, all right, I'm bringing bad energy to these calls. Feeling like they're going to say no. That stuff's so important. How the frame you hold is the frame you're going to get.
So how do you know the difference between when you're just being a bitch versus when the marketplace is giving you feedback? Because that's a gray line. That's a tough line to pick. Yeah. Right? Like we were talking about that earlier, right? Where you're pushing these $500 deals and selling them like crazy. I'm running the same strategy, going 10K. To me, it felt like I just couldn't. I did that for a year, and I just felt burnt out, and I started blaming the marketplace. Yeah. But I also had data to back it up. But how do you tell if that was just me being a bitch versus this is credible data from the marketplace?
So data's important. It's totally different if you do have data, which is, when something new, like what we were talking about earlier in the marketings and in the DMs, I was testing to see what feedback I would get from the marketplace to tell me which route to go. Yeah. Right? So, and it's also what type of day-to-day model do you want to deal with? Do you want to have 99 no's and sell one super high ticket? Or do you want to talk to a lot of people that say yes on a very low ticket? You could end up with the same revenue, but it's what do you want your business to look like? And I've tested it in all different things, and it depends on the business. I don't think there's really an answer for that, and that's why it's called business. No one's got a silver bullet for that.
Yeah, and that's the game, right? That's the chess game we're playing. But I think every business can teach you a different lesson, right? But that's why, coming back to the thing we were talking about with entrepreneurs, this is where I think it can be really valuable to get around people that have gone through what you're going through already. because a lot of times they have more data and better intuition to help you navigate those waters.
It's the most valuable thing there is proximity to people who have done the things that you want to do.
So how do you gain that proximity?
I mean, this was a big lesson for me. The first 10 years in business, I didn't do any of that. I did zero networking. I just stayed in my bubble, my business, and I became the best at that thing, which I didn't know at the time was not that great. But that's the lesson was I wasn't trying to make a certain amount of money. I just wanted to be the best at that thing. So that skill set now translates to, okay, biggest fish in a really small pond. I can work 365 days, be the best closer, best closing percentage of all time, and I can only make 300 grand, right? Like that's where it maxed out. So at that point, it's like, okay, you don't just sit in your ego and say, all right, this is where it ends. You go, okay, I need a bigger game to play to take these skills and translate into the bigger game.
So what was the bigger game you decided to play?
Raising capital. Right? So I'm doing a, let's say, $5,000 ticket door to door. Now my minimum's 100 grand with no limit.
Yeah.
Totally different ballgame.
And do you find it's harder or easier to sell a 100K ticket versus a 5K?
I think you won't be able to do the 100K if you don't learn how to do the 5 first.
Explain that.
Yeah. You're not going to play in the pros in anything in the beginning. So I think it's play where you can get in. First of all, you're probably not going to get a capital raising position without a long track record of sales and the acumen to deal with really high level people. Yeah. You know, a lot of people, you know, me included, at one point, my adrenaline would go through the roof to ask for a $500 deposit, right? So you got to get great at that, and then just don't get comfortable and keep leveling up to things that are more difficult. Higher value people, higher value products, and then one day you'll be desensitized to it all, and you'll have no problem asking somebody for $1 million for an investment, you know?
Wow, that's so true. I remember, so I had started a TikTok channel in the music industry. And I remember when I was trying to figure out how to monetize it, started to gain some traction. And so I started charging $50 an hour for consulting. As someone that was making, you know, $12 an hour at Taco Bell, I was like nervous to ask for $50 an hour. Yeah. And then I upped it to $500 packages. And I was scared to charge $500. And then I started selling $500. I was like, oh, shit. And then I joined this program. This guy's like, dude, you need to charge a minimum of $2,500. And I remember I started charging $2,500. Again, I was scared shitless to ask for that money. And then the same thing at $5,000, and the same thing at $10,000. And now I'm moving up, and now I'm doing $50,000 to $100,000 deals. That's kind of the game I'm starting to play now. And even that's a little like, ooh. But I think what makes me more confident now in being able to ask those price points is, one, I understand the evolution of what exactly you just said, and I've watched myself go through that. But I think a big thing that's making me less nervous to go after these $50,000 to $100,000 deals is I'm talking to people that have money versus beforehand I was begging a SoundCloud rapper. Yeah. Right? Like, he doesn't have the money. Yeah. And so on that, I'm curious, what is your process for qualifying leads? Are you just tripwiring them and getting anyone in the infrastructure at a low ticket and then upselling them? Or do you have some sort of process you use to help qualify someone?
Totally depends what it is. Yeah. So for the marketing business, what we've realized is we're cold DMing on Instagram. We don't run ads. We've got great margins. We think DM outreach and the strategy we use converts better than ads. Yeah. So that's a volume game, and it's cold. So you need to make a frictionless process for someone to get started with you so that you can deliver, earn their trust, and then move them into higher ticket packages. That's what we do in the marketing business. If it's something like raising capital for real estate or a hedge fund or whatever it is, private equity, there's a very small percentage of people who qualify. So now it's like you're going through a funnel, you know, to sign up for our newsletter that also says, okay, am I an accredited investor? And then you go into a bucket of I can talk to you, or if you're not, then you can't. You can still get the newsletter, you know. Yeah. But yeah, I think you got to really figure out what matches in terms of your product level to the marketplace. Yeah. So you transition from door to door into this, what would you call it, like capital raising? Yeah. And how did that business go? Tell me about that. So that came out of networking. When the pandemic happened, it blew up our food company. We ended up selling out to a private equity firm. So out of nowhere, it's just, all right, time to reinvent my life for the first time. I had built one thing, done one thing forever.
Wait, was that a door-to-door business? That's what you did after door-to-door?
Yeah, I started in door-to-door sales at that company. My dad founded it, and then we built it together and sold it off to private equity. So,
well, tell me about that day. What was that day like when you sold that company?
Super bittersweet. The things that happen when you sell your business are, you built relationships with people over a decade. I had customers that had been with me for 5-10 years.
Yeah.
It's an emotional thing to, you're praying that the new owners take care of them the way that you do, things like that. So there's a lot of emotions around not wanting to give it away.
Down, yeah.
And then huge anxiety on, okay, did I just get lucky? Can I recreate? Like, what if the next thing I can't figure it? You think about all these crazy things, which, by the way, when you have those thoughts, like, do it anyways, because then you're just going to find out you're just being an idiot. Yeah. And all the things that you're scared of typically don't happen, and then when they do, it's actually not as bad as you think it's going to be. You can get through it. You'll be all right. Yeah. So, yeah, it was really nerve-wracking, but it's also a huge celebration of 15 years of work. So, but it's like...
So what did you do? Do you go, like, party for a year?
No, I invested all the money into real estate deals. I got rid of all of it. I'd never had that much cash before. Yeah. So I was kind of scared of it, and I wanted to, cement the first 15 years of work at a certain level, cash flow from real estate, and figure out what I was going to do next, but, not have to worry about, basic bills every month, and also invest into things that were going to return back. And I love finance in the investment world. Studied it for 10 years. So I knew I wanted to get into that world, and I went out networking, going to events to find people in the finance world that I could partner with. I was like, I'm going to take this door-to-door skill set. I can speak the language of finance. I just need to find hedge funds, products, real estate that need capital, and now I can go make 10 times more money doing something I like even more. Yeah.
So you get in that space. Walk me through what happened there. Were you like, how were you finding these deals? How are you putting them together? Was it as easy as you thought it would be? Was it harder than you thought it would be? What was that like?
The deal side is actually the easiest. Yeah. It really is. If you're networked very well. Yeah. Because once you're, the world's small up there, and we have more deals than we know what to do with. So, and most people do that are in the finance space. The deals are not the tough part. It's getting the capital for the deals. Right? Yeah. So I'm like, all right, that's the high value skill set. I'll let everybody else put the deals together. Partnered, with people that are really good at that stuff. Because I'm not in the operations side, the analytics. I just want to build high level relationships. I want to talk to really interesting people, and if it's a good fit for them, we'll do a deal, and you can invest in whatever, Yeah. So that's all I did is I just hit the road. Just going to events, just meeting high-level people, and then using DM outreach to get on big podcasts, and that's how I raised all the money.
Tell me about that real quick. Right there. Using the DM strategy to get on high-level podcasts.
Yeah, so all DM outreach only works if you build your brand first. It's a prerequisite, right? If you've got 2,000 followers, why would someone that has millions of listeners want you on there, right? So you're either paying them a lot of money to go on the podcast, or you have to build a brand that's valuable, so there's equal exchange. Yeah. Right? They want to leverage your audience. I want to leverage their audience. So that's the smartest thing I ever did was at the end of the food business. I was like, I know I need to do this personal brand thing. And I hired Cody Kerns, who's just beast in that space. He's like 7 years younger than me and had a lot more money than me. I'm like, I got to listen and figure out what this kid's doing. Yeah. Who ended up being a hedge fund partner as well. He had a very key relationship. One of his neighbors was, partner at Innovation X, which is a giant private equity. That's how we have access to unicorn deals like SpaceX and Flexport. I mean, their previous exits were Palantir, Lyft, Spotify, Airbnb, the best IPOs of the last 10 years. No, right. Right. So like what's the value of one relationship is now I'm raising capital from retail investors who have no access to those unicorn investments. So now I've got a killer product and I just got to go raise the money for it and just meet people.
And so you would meet that by going to events and then doing podcasts basically.
Yeah. So that's pretty much it. Speaking on stages when I can get on them. But that's the other thing is You get on a high level podcast. It's what else can we do together? When's your next in-person event? Oh, cool. Can I speak? Like, you know, stuff like that. And that's kind of how it went.
So how do you find those podcasts?
DM them. You just find them on Instagram.
No. But how are you finding them? Are you like typing in #business podcast? Like, what's the process for actually finding high profile entrepreneurs that are running podcasts?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways to run this. It's actually not my expertise. I have VAs that do that, and I hired Cody's company to do that, his marketing business. But I think they use location services. You know, see who's checking in at all the nicest restaurants and country clubs in the world.
Interesting. How do you do that?
I don't know. I don't
location
do it.
Service. You know what? That's actually genius. You could literally go to like Nobu on Instagram.
Right.
Look at who's posting at this Nobu that's tagging this location.
Yeah.
And then cross-reference if that person is an entrepreneur.
There you go. Right. So we do that stuff for a lot of specific businesses. Right. Like we had a client that's a golf instructor, like a high-level golf pro, but he's trying to build it online. So we're just going to all the location, who's tagging themselves, checking in at the most exclusive country clubs, and then we're sending them DMs from his account, right? So you can do this for any industry.
That is some sauce right there, because that's one of the things I'm working through right now with the 7-Figure Club podcast is how do I find 7-figure entrepreneurs to interview?
Yeah.
And obviously, it's one thing to do that on a broad level, but to do that on a local level, it's a little more difficult. Am I using LinkedIn? Am I using Instagram? So I'm going to do that. I'm going to make a list of like, what places do you think around Vegas I should be looking into of like where people are checking in you think would be a good fit for something like that?
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. And here's our system. This is how we do it. It's a digital prospecting system. So it doesn't really matter what the target is. Our VAs are going to find them. They're going to follow them. They're going to like and comment on their page. Mm-hmm. Then they're going to send them the DM.
Yeah.
Now, the follow is the most important part because now your follower list is a rolling list of your prospects.
Yeah.
Which means anything they post is now going to be in your feed.
Yeah.
So the VAs sit there all day and scroll through the feed, like and comment, like and comment. They support the shit out of these people. Mm-hmm. No one else does that. They go through all the stories. Love, 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 love.
Yep.
Right? Like you're going to see, there are 7,000 people that I'm following on Instagram. I have no idea who they are. But my VAs are just making sure all day they get notifications with this face.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like engagement is such trash now on Instagram that most of the time I'm the only one in the comments. It's like your boy Justin's the only one supporting you.
Wow.
And then they send me a DM.
Yeah.
And now it's an inbound lead.
Yes. No, that's some real sauce. I'm clipping the fuck out of that.
Yeah. That's the system.
Yeah.
I mean, 10 million in revenue with just that one.
Now,
SOP.
what is your typical like outbound to conversion ratio on a $500 product? Is it like 1 in 200? Is it 1 in 1,000?
I'm gonna say it's so interesting. Every month it's different, and I think this is a really key caveat I'm gonna put on it before I say the numbers. Is that in month 1 it's going to be very different than in month 3, 6, 12. Most of our clients will quit by month 3. Because they don't understand how the strategy compounds.
They got to build a pipeline.
It compounds, right? There's people who are buying something from me that I DM'd 2-3 years ago.
Yeah, because most people, they need, 17 plus touch points before they like, know, and trust you enough to even consider talking to you?
Yeah, so my numbers are way better than somebody who's in month 1. Yeah. It's the sustainability of not quitting is what makes everything work. Yeah. So look
at us, right? We met 4 or 5 months ago, had a brief Zoom call. It didn't go anywhere, and then I ran into you at Sean Kelly's event, and then I invited you to something.
Right.
So, and then now I'm going to introduce you to Bill, and that might turn into something or it might not, and then maybe 3 years later we end up doing something.
Yeah.
Right.
Most people won't even show up to the event.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so interesting for me because I've sent over 1.5 million outreach messages in 2024, and so I had a lot of data on what worked and what didn't. And a couple key things you said right there that I should have done better that I'm really taking away from this conversation is 1, I didn't build up the engagement or the authority enough on my pages and my sales team's pages. They had the basic bare minimum to have an account and not look like a bot, but we didn't build any authority on their pages,
Yeah.
which means we're probably having to do 100x the amount of outreaches to get the same result as someone with 100,000 followers. Even if they're fake, it doesn't matter. It's just passing that sniff test.
Right. Every little thing matters.
Yeah.
It's the blue check's $15 a month. If you're not going to pay for the blue check, just don't even try this stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And everybody wants to cut corners. You got to have the blue check. You've got to have engagement service. Everything I post gets distributed by tons of influencers all over the place.
Yeah.
So everything I post has crazy engagement.
Yeah.
That's a prerequisite to trust. When you land on a page and you're doing business content, first of all, business content is just not interesting to most people, so it usually dies in the algorithm.
Yeah.
So quit trying to figure out the algorithm and do this instead.
Well, I think here's the key distinction to what you're saying, though, is this is based off of leveraging an outbound strategy as your marketing, right?
Yeah.
So this is a constant back and forth because I would consider myself a lead acquisition specialist. I've gotten over 300 million views organically. I sent over 1.5 million outreach messages. I've ran over 1,000 ads. I've gone to hundreds of networking events, and I speak every single month. So pretty much every strategy you can do, I've done. And so for me, sometimes it's hard to play the engagement game as someone that's gotten so much organically. But that's only if I want to generate lead flow from content. If my goal is to generate lead flow from outbound, you play the engagement game because it's just a way more efficient use of your time. And at the end of the day, if you can provide real value for people, does it really matter if it's an engagement service or not? You just need the chance to talk to them.
Right. If you believe you can help someone, it's your duty to do it.
Yeah.
The Instagram purists, sorry, but most of you are broke. You're not making any money, and you're not helping anyone either. So don't tell me, like, I don't want that fake shit. It's like, first of all, it's not fake.
Yeah.
These are real people.
Yeah.
Like, we're a little different than some of this other stuff out there. But it's what works.
But even then, it's like, I think it's just important to know what you're optimizing for. So, for example, if you want to be an influencer, then engagement services will hurt your ability to do that because now you're diluting the algorithm to know who your market is. If you want to rely on advertising, it can hurt you to do that because now the algorithm is having diluted data to build your lookalike audiences. However, if your strategy is outbound, it is by far the best thing you need to do. Right?
It's an important distinction,
yeah.
Right? Because that's what I'll look at with clients when I talk to them. What is your niche? How big is it? Sometimes it's not the right way to go, the way I do it. Mm-hmm. Like I had a brand, she was crushing it organically, and she wanted to do it. And I'm like, I think it's a bad idea because you serve moms. That's like, how many people on Instagram are moms? A lot, right? So that makes sense, right? If I get 1 billion views for what I do, raising capital from accredited investors and institutions, like 0.001% of that's going to be, like, the amount of views I get's irrelevant.
Yeah, so I had, when I launched my channel, at my peak, I was doing about 14 million views a month. And I was making about $2,000 a month, right? Yeah. Now, I had a video, got 7.8 million views on my channel. I would repost it every couple weeks. It would go viral every time. All these pages picked it up. Some guy ripped it, put it on YouTube, got 20 million. That video probably had over 200 million views on the internet. And I made maybe $100. Yep. Meanwhile, I had another post that was a clip from a podcast where this guy gave a marketing tactic, and then I threw a call to action at the end. I got 75 DMs from that one post, and I made $10,000 from a video with 30,000 views. Why? Because I'm serving a specific vertical versus the other one. It still was relevant to my vertical, but it served a much broader audience and it had no call to action. And so I think if you're serving a broad audience, that's where organic can be a potential better path because it's more scalable, right? Versus outbound is better if you're serving any sort of offer, probably above $500, right? 500 or more. That's where I think outbound become more effective, especially if it's serving any one specific vertical, right? I think that's a good distinction to make. Now, advertising can be great, but only if you have a runway. It might take you $20,000 to find a winning ad.
Right.
Now, if that winning ad makes you $250,000, was it worth it?
Of course.
Not if you ran out of money at 19,000 and never found that winner.
Exactly.
Right? And so for a lot of people, if you're getting started and you have less than a 6-month runway of a budget, so like if you don't have at least, honestly, probably 20 to 30 grand to put into marketing outside of media buying, like paying someone to run them, then you should focus on outbound because it's much more cost effective. You can start that for free. Yes, it takes your time capital, but once you prove there's a model there, you can outsource that and then build off of that strategy and that momentum. And then if you want to go organic, maybe start another channel that's specifically on that strategy.
Yeah. Couldn't have said any better. And that's what most people don't have the capital.
Yeah.
To go into ads. And they'll get on calls with me and they're like, well, I'm hitting the boost button. I'm doing this sponsored ad. I spent $20. Nothing happened. I'm like, start sending DMs. Like,
yeah. And when we look at people having too small of a runway, there's different types of runways, right? A lot of people don't have the proper runway with their advertising, but what a lot of people don't talk about is what is your emotional runway, right? Even with DMs, that can work, but if your emotional capacity is 20 DMs a day for 2 weeks, it's not a very long runway.
It's true.
Versus if you're a freaking former hockey player that's willing to go 12 hours a day for 10 years straight without blinking, then your runway is going to be much larger. And when I look at lead generation and marketing, I teach everyone, look at it through the lens of probability. As long as you can look at through that, you can remove yourself from the emotion. And if we look at probability, the easiest way to increase your probability is increasing the volume of whatever it is you're doing. And the easiest way to make sure you have that volume is to make sure you have a runway. So if it's an emotional runway, you need to have the proper why on why you're doing this and what it's going to create. If it's a financial runway, it's making sure you're not betting your last 5 to 10 grand on this strategy, because to be honest, you're probably better in going throwing on the roulette table. You probably have a higher probability. Yeah. Right? And so if you want to start to create something that removes your time, I think starting, and you don't have a lot of capital, outbound by far is the best way to go, because it's very low risk, high reward. The only thing it's really taking is your time, which if you're not willing to invest that when you don't have the capital, just go get a fucking job.
That's it. Yeah. Or do it on top of your job. That's like people you gotta learn how to expand your capacity and then the efficiency within the capacity. Yeah. Like how do people in the extremes, like in Elon Musk, how does he just run? I don't even know how many billion-dollar business he's running at the same time, and you're telling me that you don't have any time to do your side hustle on top of your 9 to 5.
Yeah. So what would you say are the common traits you see from these wealthy people you've been around versus someone that I would say is a wantrepreneur? It's not that they don't have hunger, but they're not seeming to get to the same places as these people that are executing at a high level. What do you think the difference is between those two people?
Well, the number one thing is why I see people failing is they try to reinvent the wheel when somebody's already figured out what works. I mean, I will give people the game, and then they'll go change something and say, well, can you help me with why it's not working? I was like, did you do this, this, and this? They said, well, I didn't think that was my personality. I thought it was a little not me. And I'm like, you're more concerned with ego, instead of what works. If you change one thing about the SOP, I can't help you. I don't have data on your emotional tweak on what works. That's what people do. Yeah. Right? I have never done something first my way. I go find the model that somebody already did the pain and suffering and figured it out, do that perfectly, and through that process of perfecting that skill set, then it's like, okay, once I'm getting the same result as that person, how do I find the next level? That's it. It's just a zero ego, know you suck, know somebody knows it better, go find that person, learn it.
Now, how do you find that person? How do you find that model?
I guess it depends on what you're doing.
Yeah.
For me, it was every time, whatever it is, let's say it's when I went into door to door, I'm like, all right, who's the top guy here? Who do I need to hang around? Yeah. How'd you do it? Genuinely curious. Tell me what you did. He's like, well, I read personal development books. Oh, how many? He's like, oh, I do 1 a month. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do 2. And then it's like, oh, how many days a week do you work to get this commission check? Yeah. He's like, 6 days a week. Everybody else is working 5, and that's why I'm crushing. I'm like, okay, well, there's one more day in the week, so I'll do 7. Yeah. It's not rocket science. Yeah. It's unemotional execution on very simple things.
Yeah, 100%. Now, what is something you think that you wish more people understood about being an entrepreneur?
Man, I think everybody has to go. Well, most people will never cross over because you just have to get a new thing. You got to get rid of what you have. To get something new, something old's got to go, and that fear of getting rid of the safety and all that stuff is just what holds people back. It's like you can always go back.
Yeah.
So I don't know what that fear is, but I've felt that in terms of, building that first door-to-door sales, let's call it, pipeline, and then you're getting referrals, and then it gets a lot easier.
Yeah.
And then you don't want to give that up to go start a new thing.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, oh, I'm going to have to get in the trenches and start over. It's like, yeah, you will. So I don't know. I think the pain of staying the same has to hurt more than, the pain of not doing it, or whatever that correlation is. It's like not knowing what's possible, it isn't something that I could live with. The what if.
Yeah, the pain of staying the same is worse than the pain of the what if.
Yeah, even if you do go to a mountaintop and lose everything. I've been through that, and I would still rather do that than just have a boring life.
Tell me a story of when you lost everything and what it taught you.
Yeah, so this just happened, big news for us. We had a major lawsuit we just won.
Oh, you won it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember we were talking about that, and you're like, we'll see.
Yeah, it's nice. We got a judgment for $114 million.
Shit.
So that's a combined lawsuit of some personal accounts, hedge fund. But yeah, that was the biggest loss for me personally, my own money, but it was the biggest emotional loss too, because the weight and responsibility of other people's money.
Are you comfortable telling that story?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what happened there?
So, yeah, we were building a fund. And we talked about the private equity fund earlier, so it was in tandem with that. It was a trading fund. Some of it was in equities, some of it was in these FX algorithms. And one of the biggest brokerages in the world went down. And since then, I've found out there's, something like 10,000 people in the U.S., celebrities, like we all know their names, reached out to us, and it made me feel a little bit better, about getting caught up in it. But one day we didn't get our wire for distributions from a brokerage, and they just went insolvent. They stopped paying, and we had to assemble a legal team and go after them, and we had so the judgments for $12.7 million back to the fund. But that thing was growing so fast. The returns were incredible, and people were referring everybody, and that fund was literally gonna explode. And then one day a big portion of it was locked up, gone, missing, whatever you want to say about it. So just started a 17-month legal battle that just ended with a big victory for us. But I lost all my income overnight. I lost a big principal of my own capital that was in there. Family, my friends, a lot of people had a lot of money in that. So the emotional weight was really tough.
How did you deal with that emotional weight?
I think if you asked me beforehand, hey, this is going to happen, like, would you do it? Could you get through it? Like, all these things, I would have been like, no, no, no. Now on the other side of it, it's the greatest gift I've ever been given.
Yeah.
Because the person I had to become to get through that, those look in the mirror moments of, am I going to run away from this problem? Which I could have, right? Or am I going to dedicate the next 12, 24 months of my life to get paid $0 to fight for all these people who trusted me, right? It's like those look in the mirror moments. You want to talk about, I remember in the early days of sales, it was really hard to pick up the phone and do the dials, make the calls. Yeah. Just because somebody might say no, right? Yeah. Now it's like, okay, we got to make 60 phone calls to deliver what could be the worst news of someone's life.
Yeah.
You want to talk about tough to make the calls, right? Yeah. So going through that process, talking people through it, leaving my baggage at the door, even though what I was going through was way worse than every person I was calling. Yeah. Right? They still had their jobs. They still, you're losing a lot of money in an investment, but you didn't lose your business, the investment, like your house, cars. Like I had to liquidate, take a huge step back in terms of lifestyle, net worth, all that stuff. So I think looking back on it, I'm rock solid. You can't break me, and that's a deadly skill set for your comeback. Yeah. Once you go through something like that, because then you know who you are. Yeah. I didn't know who I was, but I know who I am now.
And who are you?
Indestructible.
because you've been taken past the limits of what you believe you could overcome, and you did anyway.
Right.
And so now that's solidifying a framework and a perspective whenever you're back in that situation that I've overcome stuff like this before, I could do it again.
Yeah, and getting around people that this has been undeniable. Every single person I've talked to that's way ahead of me, more successful than me, in my space, out of my space, doesn't matter. They've all got stories like this.
Yeah.
But bigger.
But bigger.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's a realization of the only reason why I didn't go further earlier is because I was trying to protect myself from the danger of going to a new level. Now it's like, well, yeah, you can't go to the stratosphere without possibly falling back down to earth.
Yeah.
So once you're okay with that dynamic, I think that's when you become these people that just have done wild, crazy things.
So did you ever have, so in those moments where like we feel the weight of the world on us, I think it's natural to fall into negative feedback loops, right?
Yeah.
We start relying on vices or doing short-term behaviors to numb this pain that we're facing.
Yeah, I did that.
Yeah.
Heavy.
Yeah. And so how do you snap that negative feedback loop?
Well, the way I did it was the first 60 days from when the fun fell apart, I had a lot of bad things happen all at once. My dog of 11 years dies.
Yeah.
My 28-year-old brother gets cancer. And my fund blows up. Like, everything was just like gut punch after gut punch after gut punch. So, and I just moved to Vegas, like, just got here. And I'm renting this gorgeous house in McDonald Highlands. Like, thought I had everything I wanted, and I had to spend my time there dealing with all of this. So, yeah, no, I was literally in that infinity pool with a bottle of Maker's Mark and a speaker on cell phone, just crying through the phone calls. Every day was just a battle of just checking the names off the list, helping those people through it, and then I'd wake up every day and be like, all right, well, you can't lose your fitness, you can't lose those disciplines. So I still meal prepped my food, I still ate perfect, went to the gym every day, and then went into the dark side of dealing with it. So yeah, I just felt like if I didn't lose my fitness, if I kept my body together, that's how I'll always look. I'm in trouble if I start to let my health stuff go. So yeah, after I got through the hard part of that, I'm drinking way too much. I went to a mastermind in Puerto Rico that was specifically to get my ass kicked. I was like, I need to go somewhere where there's gonna be no alcohol, there's gonna be no distractions, it's gonna be a bunch of Navy SEAL type stuff where we're just gonna go get our asses kicked in the jungle. Yeah, that's what I did.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it was a great reset, and I came home to just figure out how I was going to restart my life.
And I think what you said there at the end is a big thing that people can do is surround yourself with the right people in those moments. Because we get in these negative feedback loops, we start to operate at a lower frequency, and we start to attract more of those lower frequency people into our life. A good way to snap that feedback loop is to get around people that make you feel shitty about the actions that you're taking because they're operating at a high frequency. Yep. It creates that dissonance, and then that snaps you back into your identity of, no, that's me too, right? And when you can get around those people, that's one thing about working with Bill is I don't have the luxury to be tired or not want to work hard because he operates 1 million miles an hour every day without stop. And so it forces me to snap into that energy and operate at my potential that I know I'm capable of, where I know, someone that's not built for that would look at it and harbor resentment. Yeah. Right. Versus I look at it and it motivates me. Right. And so I think that's one thing that pulled me out, because I had a crazy year too. My business was doing all right, but we were stuck at this capacity of it. I had a business partner die. Damn. A bunch of crazy shit happened. And in the span of 3 weeks, my business partner died, my car broke down, and my girlfriend lost all her income. Yeah. And so I became the sole breadwinner with no car and no business partner, right?
It's heavy stuff.
And I think in those moments, I found myself doing kind of like what you're doing. It's drinking more than I should, doing these things that I should. But at the end of the day, it's Bill said something to me that really resonated a couple months ago. He's like, the way you avoid burnout is by understanding that life is a song. And if a song was the same the whole song, that song would suck. It's the peaks and the valleys of the song that make it beautiful. And when you can embrace that dance, it puts you in a position where you can actually be grateful for the ride versus, crashing and burning.
That's really important, because that's exactly coming full circle to answer the question. If you're not an entrepreneur, if you're scared, you're in it for the wrong things, right? You shouldn't be in it for success, for a certain amount of money, or avoiding it because it could be hard or because you could lose money. Those are all the wrong things. You get to the other side of this and you realize that it's all about just having the life experience, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So some days you're winning, some days you're losing, but do you really want to look back and say that you didn't play the song? You just stayed in the verse the whole time? It's like, I don't want to be that guy. I'd rather be through the ups and downs of the song and look back at something beautiful of I experienced as much as I could while I was here.
Wow. That's great. Well, if you could leave everyone with one piece of advice, what would that be?
Man, that's a tough one. Usually I have a good answer for this one, but I don't want to say the same thing. I think don't get married unless you pick the right person. The relationships are going to be the most important things in your life, so pick good ones. Fire the negative people in your life. Audit that. I was just with Damon John in a green room at an event he was speaking at that we were running. And he said the biggest thing that changed his life is every year he makes a list of the people who take up negative space in his head. Like, there's always some people in your life that they're like, oh, like, it upsets me that they're not this way. They just take up space, and it's not good space. Yeah. Make a list of those people. Permanently.
Send eviction notice.
Yeah, permanently get rid of them, and just make sure you're surrounded by good people and get better relationships. And understand that most people aren't going with you from level to level. You can't get attached to a level. Like if that happened to you in high school and all your friends are still people you went to high school with, that's where you're stuck, right? So then it's college, then it's your first job, then it's your next business, then it's whatever. There will be certain people that can go with you or be happy for where you're going. Very few. Yeah. You don't have to come with me to the next level, but you better be really proud of me and really happy for me. And if I get any level of complex or you've changed or any of that, I used to try to mold myself to keep relationships. Life's too short. If they're not happy for you, they got to go.
Bars. Appreciate you coming on, man.
Sure.
That was great.